All right. Thanks, everyone, again. Let's begin. I would wanted to start with where we are today from a sports industry standpoint. And a recent research from Morgan Stanley in August 2025 says that the sports industry is leaving about $130 billion of revenue on the table. That's roughly 25% of the overall revenue calculations they have. I want you guys to focus next 40 minutes on how much of that upside you can get for your organization or if you're a partner for your customer. Hi, everyone. My name is Abhishek Rath. I am part of AWS Professional Services. Now, Professional Services is part of AWS, which helps customers to accelerate their journey onto cloud. Whether you're innovating, you're migrating, we work with our teams as well as with partners to help you in that journey. I'm a ProServe account executive, so my job profile allows me to work with C-suite and many of the customers in the media entertainment industry and sports games industry and provide them innovative solutions in their journey to cloud. With me, I have here James Keller, and let him introduce himself now.
Hi, thanks, Abhishek. So yeah, James Keller. You can probably tell from my accent I come from the UK, so I'm just a visitor here for this week. It's lovely to see so many smiley faces there. We're quite glad that they've moved the bean bags because we were worried you were going to make yourselves just a little bit too comfortable. I've been in the media industry for almost 30 years now, and I reckon quite soon it's going to make my hair go grey and fall out, but it hasn't happened yet, so I feel like I'm doing okay there. I've worked a fair bit on different supply-side companies, so I spent some time at Cisco. Before that, I was at NDS and Quantel, which perhaps some of you have heard of, I don't know. I've been with AWS for just over 4.5 years now. And honestly, I'm really enjoying it because we get to build some great stuff, and we're going to try and give you a feel for some of that later on through this afternoon. Abhishek.
All right. I actually forgot to talk about where did I work before. So in AWS, I've been working for the last 4 years. Prior to AWS, I spent about 17 years working for Sony. Some of you are here today. Worked with the studio for a long time, being in technology leadership position there. But between us, we have spent quite a lot of time in the past 25 years or so working with media entertainment, games and sports customers. So we have a lot of understanding of the partners, the players, the industry, and so on and so forth. And we'll try to present that in front of you. What we have here today is a very business and functionality-based presentation, not super technical. So we hope that you understand why we are doing certain things, how do we approach to do those things, and for technical deep dives, we can have separate follow-ups and so on and so forth. So today we're going to sort of talk about a few things. First, we're going to look at what are some of the industry trends we have as far as sports is concerned. Right? And these are latest trends and how we look into the future. Next, we're going to talk about some of the focus areas based on the trends and the challenges that the sports industry is facing today. Right after that, we will jump into what our capabilities are in that space. What does ProServe do? And when I talk about ProServe, it's AWS Professional Services, along with any partners that we choose and work with, which is a wide variety of them, hundreds of thousands of them, to realize the benefits that the customers are trying to get to. And finally, we have 2 use cases we're going to talk about very specifically in terms of how have we approached innovation, how have we approached migration and modernization in the industry such as sports.
And that's the fun bit, because that's when I'll be talking.
All right, fine.
Come on, man.
All right, let's go. So challenges, right? So again, there are a lot of challenges that we see, or business trends that we see across sports industry. We chose these 4 because it resonates a lot with many of our customers we work with. First and foremost is the AI-powered analytics and performance. It's essentially looking at real-time biomechanics and data-driven insights to sports agencies, teams, and coaches, and so on and so forth. There is a term here, biomechanics. And since we have a smarter person in the room, I'll let him explain what that really means and what do we do.
Yeah, so I think you probably know this most of it already, but basically when we're talking about biomechanics, we mean, let's imagine you've got a big stadium, you've got dozens of cameras around the edge of that. So you're capturing multiple speeds of camera, multiple angles. You can fly the spider over the top and all of those things. And based on that, we can build up quite a complex real-time view of what the players are actually doing. Wouldn't it be good if you could capture the position of their elbows? That's not an elbow, that's a wrist. I'm so sorry. Or wrists, shoulders. AWS says I'm not allowed to use the word
Stop
but.
there. Yeah.
But that's also a good thing to know. If you can work out where the players' knees are, perhaps where their arms are holding, say, a hockey stick or something like this, you can build up a huge amount of very useful information. You can work out where all the players are in the field. You can work out who's about to hit the ball, depending on what the sport is, whether it's football or whatever. I think you've come to understand the correct use of the word football, I think, Abhishek.
Well, thank you for enlightening me there.
Yes.
You talking about soccer?
I know I meant football, but let's call it soccer if that makes you more comfortable.
All right. The next thing is about fan experiences. You have posters here. We have solutions. We are working with many customers. That's another important field. I feel like that's exploded in the last few years. James, why don't you talk a little bit about what that means from your
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's quite a lot of sports fans right here, right now in the room, but I think we all understand as business providers to sports just how important those fans are. The people who would like to analyze every single move of the game from all of the different angles and would like to be able to consume the sport in a way that suits them. So maybe they'd like to always track their favorite player. Maybe they'd like to be able to generate automatically a highlights package that they can go and review again after the game. They can maybe go through it with their friends that shows all of the plays, the players, the goals which are important to them. I'm still focused on soccer. I hope that's acceptable. And getting all of the data, the masses of information which is coming in real time, live during the game. Wouldn't it be good if you could stream that into the player experience so they can get pop-ups, informatics and so on during the game, showing them exactly what's going on, making predictions about where the next player is going to go, but tailored to their requirements. So that's what we mean here by the hyper-personalization, and that's a very, very growing part of the industry.
All right, thank you for that. Let's move on to the next one, which is revenue diversification. We understand from our customers that rights fees and tickets are not good enough for sustaining long-term in terms of revenue diversification. So we're looking at a lot of our customers looking into creating digital subscriptions. They're also creating D2C campaigns. They're creating integrated betting experiences. That's a big thing right now for the past few years. So what does that really mean? From our perspective, what that means is you need an ability to be able to test, iterate on them, and release to market fairly quickly. And that's where cloud and AI basically comes into play. Hence, we thought it's an important thing for us to look into. And finally, it will be a miss not to talk about sustainability in today's world. Because whether it's your brand, whether it's your fan base, whether it's venue economics, sustainability has become a very important thing. AWS takes that very seriously. And as we look from stadium all the way through the mobile devices or any devices where customer is consuming content, we are looking for ways to make sure every step of that is sustainable in a way it makes sense for your business as well as for the fans.
I just want to cut in here, Abhishek. So just to add to the point about operational efficiency, one of the things which I'm sure you're all aware is that if you spin up all of the cloud resources for the entire duration of, say, a soccer season or whatever, that can be quite expensive. If you have all of those big fat instances sitting there not being used except when the game is going on, that's clearly not desirable. So one of the things which we're asked for a lot is, can we arrange some kind of automated orchestration which will maybe ingest the station schedule and will spin up those resources in sufficient time to make sure that the video feeds from the stadium are working properly, but wouldn't it be good if all of that could be automated so that you're only running your codecs, you're only running your packager, you're only running the ingest into storage when it's actually needed. So that's another thing which everybody is asking us for.
Absolutely right. Now let's move on to some of the challenges. So based on the trends, some of the challenges that we see is there is an explosion of data, right? You're tracking data from broadcast, you're tracking information, you're tracking probably medical information from athletes. there is betting information, there is app events that are occurring. So there is an explosion in terms of the amount of data that's been managed in a real-time fashion. And at the same time, we also have to make sure there is zero tolerance in terms of uptime, right? So all of those factors together makes a serious case for looking into what kind of architecture, what kind of solution that you need to build to be able to support all of that. James, anything else you want to add here?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's fairly obvious, but if you imagine that literally every frame, and maybe from some quite high-speed cameras, huge amounts of information are being captured. So if you've got 2D and 3D data being processed and generated in real time, that is going to generate a tremendous amount of numbers flowing through the system. There's the video, there's the audio, you might have cameras running at double time or even more. There's all sorts of sources of information, and you've got to make sure that all of that is properly synchronized. We'll talk later on about some things which you can do to synchronize, maybe use audio to synchronize different video feeds. But if all of those are being captured at different speeds from slightly different parts of the stadium and so on, maybe some of them have had graphics overlaid on top of them as well, it's a real challenge to bring all of that together and synchronize it in a consistent, reliable way.
Yep. So the real question is, how do you take advantage of some of these opportunities you have without taking too much risk and without maybe having resources at your disposal to be able to do this faster? And that's where our focus areas come in. And we have 4 of them right here. The first one being fan experience. We kind of talked about that a little bit, which is really providing you sort of low latency live experience deliveries. It's basically tailored for every single fan in the way they want to consume the information. Anything you want to add there, James?
Yes, I mean, I think we've talked a bit about the how sensitive the fans are to the data that they really, really care about. And just, it's so critical that you get the timing of all of those things and the reliability exactly right. Think what it would feel like if you're a fan. You're watching a game, and then the players are about to score, perhaps, and then before the ball has actually left the player's foot, it's the actual sports demonstration right here. Before the ball has left the player's foot, you get a graphics pop-up saying the score has changed. That's a disaster in terms of the experience. And we have to work very closely with our customers in order to make sure that that kind of thing is organized and works as well as possible.
Cool. Let's jump into performance analytics next. This is a topic that's been discussed quite a few of our customers, which is essentially around athlete safety, their performance, their health, and also about the quality of adjudication we have, which is the officiation or officiating as they call it. James, why don't you go a little bit into the details and talk about what that means?
So look, there's a gold mine of information there. We talked quite a lot about the biomechanics, but think about the things that you can use that for. If you've got players who are being scrutinized very heavily by their own coaches, by their own fitness people on the team, there's a lot of information that you can get by watching very slow motion replays, just watching how they move. Maybe not quite as athletically as this, but you get the idea. There's a number of other quite important use cases that can be taken from that data as well. Abhishek mentioned adjudication. I'm sure you've all enjoyed watching things like VAR on the soccer matches, but anything that we can contribute to making that a better experience for the viewer and also perhaps for the betting public as well, I think is very important. One use case that we haven't called out here specifically, but I do want to mention also, is anything to do with match rigging. Now, I realise that's rather a controversial thing to bring up, but that we are starting to get interest in, is there anything that can be done using AI perhaps on the stats of the games, but also just looking on the behaviour of the individual players, just to see if there's anything that ought to be flagged there. I think I'm nervous about that example, but I do think it's worth being aware of, and I think it just gives you some idea of how rich the things are which we're being asked to look at now.
Cool. Now let's move on to data analytics. Irrespective of the industry, across every media entertainment company today, building a customer 360, whether you call it fan 360, customer 360, is an initiative that everybody is embarking on if they have not already. And what that really means is there is a movement within all these organizations that we work with from a sports or media entertainment standpoint to build what's called data products, right? And what that does is essentially enable you to monetize the data that you have or create new opportunities for you to do business with other partners in terms of making sure you have sponsorship evaluations, making sure you can do targeted marketing, so on and so forth. Anything you want to add there, James?
Yeah, just to give a little bit more color to that, what do we mean by monetization? The kind of thing that we're being asked to do is to provide some kind of normalization of all of this vast amount of data which is available, and also then to expose that potentially to partners or customers of our customer through standardized APIs and so on, where they can do unified discovery and then search, and then actually access that data. And if you can provide some kind of, I'll say normalization again, but some kind of consistency in how that is presented and how that works, so you as the consumer of that data don't need to know where that's come from, that is a very, very attractive proposition for our customers, and that's something that we're working actively with quite a few of them to start building.
Cool. And the final point here that we want to make is really around the next best action, right? Whether it's calculating win probabilities, whether it's calculating what should be the next best move that a particular player can take or a team can take in any kind of sports, there is a lot of traction there. There's a lot of conversation we are having with our customers and building solutions on that space, which is essentially around innovation acceleration. Now, why are we talking about all these areas and what's got to do with professional services? Our role in this entire journey for the customer is really to de-risk it, right? That's why we're here. We help you in kind of picking up the right place to start. So there is a lot of things that you can do here. All of these 4 focus areas may have many projects that you can take on to create the revenue efficiency, the cost efficiency, anything else you're looking into building, even new products. We know that it's tough to choose from, so we also help you in the process in prioritizing that by working with you on a business case. That's one thing we focus on. Second thing is really understanding what the architectural patterns are. What is the right way to do certain things? Because technology is changing very fast, and we want to make sure we set you up for success in long term. And finally, we also work with you side by side along with partners. So you are never left alone. We work with the customer alongside their teams to make sure that we're able to build the right kind of solutions for you. So next, we will shift gears a little bit into more practical examples at our delivery models. How do we work specifically in which areas? And then we'll jump into the 2 use cases that I will have the smarter person here cover.
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
In terms of the 2 use cases we're talking about. So let's jump in a little bit into what our capabilities are. I could have listed many things here, but we chose to only sort of list 5 key things that we focus on, right? The first and the foremost is the bread and butter for what AWS have been doing for the last many years, right? Which is essentially helping you to accelerate your cloud migration journey, give you modernization patterns and so on, so it's easy for you to go through that process. The second thing, as we observe through challenges, trends, and focus areas, we are heavily entrenched in building solutions which are around fan engagement. And we are talking about real-time analytics versus anything which is static in nature. The third core focus area for us in terms of AWS ProServe is also live cloud production or live sports content delivery. So whether it means that we are packaging it, we are delivering it, or we are ingesting multiple data sources, end-to-end supply chain, we're able to work with the customer to build those solutions. Last but one is performance analytics. I think James kind of touched upon that a little bit. So we definitely focus on that space as well, and you'll get some examples of that today. And finally, one thing that's a common theme across any media, entertainment, games, and sports company, really helping them in building data lake solutions, which enable you to unify your data sources, which is a core concept now to make sure you have AI solutions built on top of it, not only to provide you insights, provide you recommendations, provide you next best action, also give you real-time information to be able to make decisions.
Yeah. And they let you do that monetization, which we talked about just now.
Absolutely right. Anything else you want to cover here?
No, I think, and if you forget anything else, then I'll let you know. But otherwise, good.
Very kind of you. Let's move on. All right. So now we go into a little bit of how do we really work, right? Some of you may have worked with us. Some of you may not have worked with us. We have a classic model by which we do our deliveries. And when I talk about deliveries here, we're talking about solutions that we are building for our customers in those areas we talked about, right? So we do start with a discovery process because we believe in working backwards from our customers, which basically means understanding what the KPIs are, what are you trying to achieve, whether it's athletes' performance, whether it's monetization opportunities, whether it's building a Gen AI-based agentic chatbot or a solution. We want to understand what that is, and that's the discovery process that we do.
And it's really, sorry, Abhishek, and it's really important, and we will try very hard to understand where you're trying to get to. We want to know why you're doing this, what you want the outcome to look like, so that we can work backwards from it, rather than just say, oh, we're going to build a such and such. It's much more important for us, and we think for customer success, to focus on where you're trying to get to and why. If we can understand the why, then we'll be very much more helpful to you.
Right. And then once we have that in place, we really go into what's called foundation and POC. Now, we use POC term very, very seriously because POCs should not be science experiments. POCs should be the ones where you're actually able to take it and move it to production. Hence, you see a combination of foundation and POC together because we want to make sure the foundation is built out. When I'm talking about foundation here, in technical terms, it could be building your pipelines that are necessary to move code from lower environments to higher environments. It could be building your data strategy, building your overall architecture. Even if we're doing smaller POCs to prove out points, we want to make sure everything is built and everything is automated for you in terms of infrastructure as a code so that you can take that POC and move it forward.
And I think for me, the most important thing of a POC is defining what the success criteria are. It's more important than executing it. If you just do some stuff and it's a science experiment, as Abhishek says, yeah, that's great fun, and we've probably ended up with a better understanding of what the technology space is, but it doesn't move the business forwards necessarily. So if we can get a clear statement, understood and agreed by everyone, what success or failure, and failure is fine in a POC, what those look like, then it's going to be a much, much, much more effective experience from a business point of view.
Yep. And then final two chevrons that you see is really sort of going and building the end-to-end implementation and also providing you with abilities to do feature enhancement on top of that. If you see this kind of rough timeline, the reason I put some timeline here is it's directional, depends on your use cases, but we move really fast. That's the way we want to work, which is within the 12 to 24 weeks, you will have a full capability built out that you're looking for. Of course, if the complexity increases, then the timelines changes, but we believe in moving faster through the process. And when we are doing this, we are actually building with you, not for you, right? What that means is, as we start to design our architecture and design, we look at what kind of resourcing we need, not just from build perspective, but also to make sure to run and operate efficiently as ProServe pulls out of it. Because we don't provide managed services ourselves, right? We want you guys to be able to feel comfortable, to be able to operate this and run on production. So as we're doing this process, we're also looking at cost, we're also looking at security, reliability, and all the good aspects that comes with AWS as a platform, and making sure you're set up for success as you move through your production journey.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
It's really important to stress that this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's absolutely tailored to what your needs are. So what resources you have available, what your level of experience is, what your sweet spots are, and what you're most concerned to get assistance with. And we will build a custom resource profile and custom set of milestones and so on to match all of those things so that we are doing what you need rather than just giving you a complex prepackaged solution.
Absolutely right. Now I'll jump into the bottom section, which is really, really important. So the big block that you see here in black, we believe in continuous enablement, right? Which means like every customer is on a different path of maturity in terms of cloud. We have some customers who are really, really mature. They've already been using cloud for many years. And some customers are just getting onboarded to cloud. So we believe as we go through this journey of implementations, we want to make sure there is enablement. What we mean by that is we have a lot of trainings that are available online, as well as instructor-led, depending on what kind of training you want to take on. In addition to that, as you go through the process in the journey of building out the implementation, we will have our teams providing very targeted enablement sessions of what we are building, what services we're using, and how you guys are going to get to use them as well as know how to maintain them going forward. James, anything else you want to add there?
And we can make that quite reactive on the way through the engagement. So typically what will happen is it'll become obvious after, I don't know, a month or two that there are some services which are very, very complex or critical and really need to be understood in depth and fully embraced by the collaborative team that has both AWS people and customer people in it. And so we'll react to that, and we can do very, very deep dives. We'll bring in specialists as needed, or it could be that the consultants that we've got engaged can already do that, but that's something that we generally find gives a really good experience.
Yeah.
I'd like to know why those people are there having so much fun as well. I think it's
I don't know. We should focus on our presentation.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm easily distracted.
All right, cool. So let's moving on to the last bit of this presentation, right? It will be a miss not to talk about what are some of the capabilities that is coming up with generative AI and agentic AI that can be used to do the implementations faster, right? So we believe in building accelerators, and what we mean by accelerators are, let's say you want to set up a data lake architecture within your organization for the FANS 360 we talked about. There are already ready to deployable code that's available, which is approved by our security team members, and taking that and customizing it for your use cases is something we provide as a benefit. And what is the advantage of that? Your time to market, in terms of how much time you take to build some of these things from scratch, it reduces significantly. Not only do we do that, we also work with our partners in these engagement opportunities and bring their accelerators in our journey, because we don't believe we have to build everything ourselves. If a partner who is very purpose-driven in terms of working on the agentic space, and we partner with them in one of these engagements, we also bring in their accelerators. We also get them go through our security process to make sure we are comfortable, our customers deploying them into their environments. So you get that benefit of both agentic AI capabilities to accelerate your process to production. You also have expertise of the partners that work with ProServe to make sure we do end-to-end implementations for you. With that, all the boring bits are over.
What?
So I'm going to transfer over to this gentleman.
I've never been called that before, but thank you.
For the two use cases we really want to talk about today. So you let me know when you want to keep switching, but let's go to first one.
Right. So this one is we've got some links at the end, but this is based on some work that we did with WBD over the last probably nearly 2 years altogether. The basic scenario is that you have a bunch of video feeds coming in live. You have a bunch of metadata describing those feeds also coming in. And what we were asked to look at was a number of technical challenges to do with the timing, quality, and the reliability of the data in those feeds. So what you have to do is think about where does that data come from? So let's imagine it's a soccer game, because it was, and that therefore makes it a good example. So typically what happened in this case is that you have a human sitting, let's imagine, just picture in your mind a noisy English pub. There's a big screen up on the wall of the pub, and there's a guy sitting there, or a gal, with a pint of beer, a laptop, and a delicious plate full of chips, maybe with some mayonnaise that they're dipping them in. Can you picture that, Abhishek?
Yeah, I did that with you once, so
yeah.
I know what that means.
And you understand, obviously, that when I say chips, I mean I'm using the...
You mean fries?
No, I mean chips.
All right, let's move on.
Not crisps, obviously. That would be silly. Yeah, so basically, this is a noisy, slightly fragile, slightly easily distracted environment, a bit like me. So therefore, what does that mean in terms of the fan experience? It means that some of these timing markers can be a bit late, or maybe a bit early. So if you think about a really complicated soccer play, let's imagine it's a penalty. Think about what actually happens. First of all, the players are running around, and one of them commits an egregious foul on one of the other players. They fall down, well, I'm not actually going to physically assault you right now, but maybe later. And so what happens? The referee is likely to blow the whistle. There's likely to be some kind of indication at that point, oh yes, it's been a penalty awarded, and then the kicker, if that's the right word, maybe the striker, from the victim team will go and take the ball, stick it on the spot, have a bit of a look around, and then they'll actually perform the kick, and then perhaps it will go into the goal, perhaps it will bounce off the goalie's head, we don't know. The point is that there's quite a lot of things happening, and it's very easy for the human who's logging all of this to make errors. You'll get the main things in there, but if you simply take those dumbly as they arrive in and translate those into live graphics on, let's imagine the hyper fan is watching on their iPad at home, as well as they're watching it on the big screen. The last thing they want is lots of variability in those events being revealed to them. You can also have other technical issues, so it might be maybe there's a timing offset, so perhaps the time codes which have been tagged onto those metadata events don't line up quite with the source time code that's actually come in with the video, and therefore you can get permanent offsets going on as well. So that I think describes the context of the problem that we're trying to solve. And so how did we deal with this? The most important thing here is to understand that we picked a solution that was well suited to the customer requirements, and actually we ended up doing quite a lot of this using the audio rather than the video. And the reason for that is that you can get a huge amount of very quick information from processing the audio, which is a lot quicker and a lot cheaper and a lot lower latency than it would be if you did this using the video. A really good example is if you think about the referee whistle. If you take the audio for this feed which is coming in, you do a frequency transform, and then you can see an audio spectrum. Now, I don't know how many audio engineers we have here. I'm sure lots of you will understand this very easily. But if you imagine that rather than seeing a waveform, you're seeing the frequency domain as time goes by. And guess what? The UEFA, that's easy to say, the referee whistle is a standard design. And when the referee actually blows the whistle, it always sounds on two very distinct, well-specified frequencies. And that makes it super easy to spot in the audio spectrogram. So we can get a very high level of confidence of exactly when the whistle was blown. And as soon as you've got that information, you can lock it in and you can nail down the timing of the metadata. So whether it was the kickoff whistle, maybe it was the whistle which was blown when I've committed another foul on Abhishek and I've knocked you over. But we can see exactly when the metadata for that foul ought to have been captured. And we built with the customer. In fact, the guy who built it, Andrew Lee, is not here right now. He sometimes hangs around over near the Live Sports Forum. He's actually doing a live workshop over down in is he in the Mandalay Bay?
Mandalay Bay.
Yeah, so he wanted to be here, but I need to give him some of the credit for that as well. And he and I and a few others from the customer wrote the blog that we'll give you a link to at the end of this. What was the outcome? We've ended up basically eliminating the human errors. We had a 96% success rate, and we had to do a few other things as well as the audio. We had to use the overshot right at the start of the game to be confident that we were actually seeing the kickoff. And as soon as you can see all the players standing there ready to go in formation, that gives you a high level of confidence of what part of it you're looking at. This last one is really good fun. We weren't expecting to do this at all, but we noticed that it's fairly obvious if you think about it, that there's a lot of information to be had from the reaction of the crowd. So we basically used the crowd noise and particularly level changes in the crowd noise to understand when things were happening. So obviously the ball goes into the back of the net. Everyone in the crowd is going to stand up and roar if they're on the winning team at that point. So we were able to use that as well to get additional confidence of when the events were happening. And it turned out that you can also use that to gauge the level of interestingness. Is that a word? It is now. The level of interestingness of a particular play which has just happened, and you kind of get that information for free as long as you look for deltas in the audio level, and take into account that as you get to the end of the match, things are probably getting a bit noisier anyway, you can learn quite a lot from that. So you can actually generate additional metadata that might feed into things like highlight generation and so on.
I want to actually ask you something there.
Oh dear, not difficult questions, please.
You and I worked on something for World Cup Soccer back in 2022. You want to talk a little bit about the sync, the challenge of sync as you get live feeds, multiple data sources, and how
because it's really challenging. If you've got a load of free-running cameras, which hopefully are Genlock, but they may not be, and it's quite possible that the batteries in the timecode generators near them have gone flat or been replaced and they haven't been reset properly, and all of those lovely things which can happen, you can get some quite noisy, out of synchronized video data coming in. And we talked about timing problems in the metadata as well. We looked at a use case last year related to Formula One, and I think I heard some Formula One things happening over there earlier. If you've got the cameras on the cars and they're driving around the track, it's a bit late to be resetting the timing generators there as well. But we've started looking at things like the beep 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 that you get when the green lights come on at the beginning of the race. So there are things that can be done there in order to deduce what the timing information is for those things that need to be synchronized together.
Right. Let's move on to the use case number 2.
Right. So this use case relates to, it's more focused on migration, but the overall context is still, this is real-time data for sports. And what we're talking about here is something where a customer has built a lot of very complex, very mature data processing algorithms, which originally run on-premise, probably actually at the stadium. Not always, but usually. And those are quite mature, they're probably quite complicated, and they're very, very high value. The customer derives a lot of their identity and their unique offerings from the quality of those algorithms. So these things are precious, they're also complex, and they're quite fragile. So what we needed to do was to think about how to get those complex on-prem workflows moved into cloud and working well with all of the scaling benefits that gives you, but without damaging the very important things, the precious things that have already been built. These things are very high performance. They're typically using the fastest GPUs and CPUs that you can get on-prem, and we needed to think quite hard about what is the correct way to run those to get maximum benefit as though it had been born in the cloud. The kind of tech that we're talking about in here is likely to involve C++, there's probably FFmpeg in there and so on, and these things have got implications. Not all that many developers these days love working in C++. They'd rather be writing Python inside Lambda functions, and there's no better or worse thing, they're just different. So how did we do this? We had to work out a way to get the benefits of being in cloud and doing that refactoring, but without spoiling the precious things. And in general, what we had to do was think about things like how do you move to more horizontal scaling than vertical scaling? Some of my customers got quite bored of me asking, what's your multi-threading strategy in this algorithm? Because if you relied on having a single super hot vCPU and then you tried to put it in a regular instance, it might not do quite what you'd like. So we needed to think about things like that. Really important bits are the glue around the edge. Right at the beginning of this talk, we mentioned plugging into the customer schedule systems and ingesting those, and the scaling and the need to optimize costs. So one of the most important things we can do is to orchestrate all of these services now running on computing cloud in a cost-efficient way to do it. We needed to try to work out how best to use the serverless technology which is available in the cloud to maximum effect. But to get that position on the spectrum right, I mean, at one end, you could simply say, we're going to take everything that's on-prem, do a full lift and shift, run it in cloud, and just leave it like that, which is all great fun, but it doesn't get you that magical benefit. The other extreme would be to say, right, we're going to rewrite everything using lambdas and queues, and that doesn't work either, because you then end up having to throw away those precious algorithms that they've spent so much time on. I think things I'd call out here as particularly important. We always end up spending a lot of time designing the APIs. So that's things like the control API for the deployments, it's things like the schedule ingest and all of those things. I've mentioned here some of the services that we typically end up using. I'm not going to read that list out to you. I think you all have a perfectly good set of eyes, even if it has been slightly impacted by the delicious lunches, which I'm sure you've enjoyed. But yeah, you normally expect to see an API gateway with a really good hard API that's thoroughly designed and agreed with the customer. We'd expect to see Lambdas as the handlers behind that. I mention ECS and Fargate here because I think it's quite interesting to think about the choice of, I'll call it instance type, but really I mean, is this something where we're going to run it and just let Fargate take care of it all, or do we need to be a little bit more prescriptive and intimate in exactly what it looks like? And the short answer is Fargate's good and quick to get you started, but if you care very much about what instance type you've got, maybe you've got some extended instruction sets on the CPU and so on, suddenly Fargate it looks a little bit less attractive. It's a question of choosing the right thing. I mentioned AppStream and DCV, and I could mention LeoStream here as well, as a key part of the system to make it fly in the cloud. This has got to be something which keeps the operators happy. We all know that sports operators are under a lot of pressure to deliver. We talked earlier about there is zero tolerance of black frames or freezes and so on, and naturally the operators are going to feel the pressure of that. So it's really important that we give them a good experience with the control surfaces, the latency of what they see on their screen locally, and also the picture quality that they're experiencing. So these are things which we've built with the customers, both the data processing and also all of the interfacing, the integration with the schedule and so on. And that's what you have to do to make the system fly. So I'll talk quickly. Abhishek's mentioned it already, but I want to come back to this point about the cultural transformation. How do we actually work with the customer team? Do we just turn up with a load of engineers on a bus who come and sit in a small corner of the customer's office and type away, not talking to anybody? Or do we actually work with the customer? And obviously the answer is the latter. One of the things which I always specify in any of these proposals is the personas that we need from the customer. I want to draw your attention to the product owner there. That's probably the single most important thing. So what I mean is the customer is usually a single person who is able to turn up at the sprint reviews every 2 weeks at the end of the sprints and agree that the functionality that we've delivered is what they were asking for. And getting that intimate connection is really important. What we love to do is to have a team which is roughly 50% customer engineers and 50% which has come from AWS. And I'd probably try to get them in a single Scrum team, or at least multiple Scrum teams, but each with a combined breakdown. Because it's the best way to make sure that all of the design decisions are surfaced and fully embraced by the customer team, and also that handover at the end of the engagement is almost a non-event because they already know what it is that they've been built. They've been involved, they've probably written at least half as much of the code, and we find that to be an incredibly good way to get that collaboration done and to have a customer team which is super confident that they can operate, they can maintain, they can extend the system, and that it's theirs, they own it, they love it, they built it. It's not something that's been inflicted on them.
All right.
So what was the outcome of all of this? The engagements that I've just been talking about, that both the first and the second use cases have launched successfully. They're in production. They're working now on live sports leagues. We have successful series. We have successful customers and customers of customers.
All right. So we've spent good 45 minutes already talking about all this stuff. So what does it all mean to you guys and gals over in the crowd? We wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what's your call to action here, right? So we do have the blog reference here, which is publicly available for you to refer to. It's on the AWS website. Now, we talked about trends. We looked at challenges. We kind of looked at the focus areas that comes out of those trends and challenges and where we are focusing from an AWS Professional Services standpoint to transform customers' business. Now, so what do you do next, right? We want you all to kind of identify what's that high impact use case you want to start with, because that's where everything begins. It could be a FAN 360 initiative that you're currently working on. It could be improving your live event data accuracy and latency. It could be a Gen AI assistant, as I talked about, or it could be just modernizing your on-prem system as one of the use cases James described. So what we want to do is we want you guys to leverage AWS's broader ecosystem. There is a dedicated section for AWS in sports. There are lots of articles, lots of design patterns that's available for you to consume. Professional services, our technical teams are available to help you in your journey as you start to look at one of these use cases, right? So all we want to say as a closing thought is you're not in this alone. We want to be part of your journey. We want to bring in the right partners. We want to lean in, if required, in certain cases, to help you to achieve the innovation and the acceleration that you want to achieve throughout your process. All right? Thank you so much for your time then.
Thank you. Thank you very much.